And I have not lost faith. I'm not in despair. I haven't lost faith because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice.
What is gender identity?
Gender is something that's often misunderstood because we think about it in a binary. You think only male and only female. And they think about it in relation to, often people think about it in relation to sexual orientation. And they're actually completely different. Gender identity is a person's mental aspect. It's how they feel about themselves, who they are. In many cases, you have kids as young as 3 and 4 years old that have, from the time they could talk, they have absolutely identified with the opposite gender that they were assigned at birth. So gender identity is a person's internalized gender. It's what it means to them.
My name is Mia Macy, and I was originally born in Phoenix, Arizona. And one of my first memories, probably 3 or 4 years old, I knew that I was supposed to be a little girl. So I remember every birthday, just that was what I asked for. And I didn't live in an environment that was really socially acceptable. So I went the other way. I was going to be Superboy. I was going to do everything to just suppress that feeling. And so playing sports or hanging out with guys. And then when I turned 18, I thought, then I'd go in the military. I got out of the military and I went back and started school and testing to be a police officer. And then worked my way up as a detective. And then went into public affairs. And then eventually to the computer forensics, where we investigated robbery, homicides, and child sex crimes.
I am your daughter, but as a lesbian, I am 4 times more likely to kill myself.
My name is Ashlyn Johnson, and I'm currently a social justice advocate in D.C. So about 7 years ago, I started working for an employer in the South, one of the most progressive cities in the South, Atlanta. When I decided to work for this employer, I saw they had a non-discrimination policy. So I felt comfortable applying for the job and taking the job. Everything was going well. I got great reviews. And then one day my employer went on my computer. I guess she probably pieced things together with my partner, and she discovered that I was gay. And once she did, everything pretty much changed the employment situation.
I am your colleague, but I can be fired in 29 states simply for being gay or lesbian.
Within 72 hours, I was notified that the position was no longer available. And like everyone in the world, I was watching the federal budget fail. It looked like government was going to shut down. They had sent me, she said that she had lost all the positions. She wasn't going to be able to fill any of them. Sorry about that, but you lost your job. So I thought that's the reason I had lost it. But then like everyone, I watched Washington live in D.C. and at like 9 p.m. at the last minute, the budget went through. So I was all excited. And then, so the next following Monday, I called her and said, okay, I'm ready to start. And she wouldn't answer my calls. They wouldn't answer my phone calls. They wouldn't answer my emails. They wouldn't answer anything. So I went into panic mode, started looking for work, started looking for a job. Went to the Transgender Law Center, though, because different employers that were interviewing me were like, you should talk to somebody about this. So I went to TLC, and we just started an initial inquiry. And what we found was that they did, in fact, didn't kill the positions. They actually kept the positions. But they hired somebody that was unqualified. They had never been in the military, never been police, never been trained. And subsequently, they also came to me and said, you might have a legitimate complaint. But unfortunately, because you're transgender, it's not covered as a complaint. And that was, like, devastating. Because I was like, wait a second. I could have a legitimate complaint, but I'm not an equal citizen. Serve my country, serve my community, but I'm not even allowed to go to court or ask the questions that I wanted to ask.
The biggest misconception is that the LGBT community are somehow different or outside of mainstream society. And at the end of the day, people say things like gay marriage and same-sex marriage, but it's marriage. It's two people that go to their house and they pay their bills and they walk their dog and they raise their kids, and they don't want to get fired for that. The transgender community, people just don't understand who these folks are. The bisexual community, it's the same thing. They get put into boxes, and I could speak for an hour about the problems people have in that. But it's basically, the misconception is this othering, that there's some sort of counterculture going on, when it's simply people want to be recognized as who they are and live their lives. In 36 states, gender identity is not covered as an enumerated class for protection from employment discrimination. And in 29 states, sexual orientation is not covered in that way.
I stuck it out for a month, and then, there was one day I got sick and I had to, I ended up being in the ICU for a week. And I let my employers know. They didn't contact me to let me know anything else, except for a week later they FedExed me a termination letter that informed me that I was being terminated because I failed to meet the school's attendance policy. And the only days I actually did not make it to the office were the days I was in the ICU. I was informed by Lambda Legal that I had no federal protections, I had no state protections, and that there was a law in our little policy in Atlanta that could protect me. But they pretty much saw that there was nothing they could do. After that situation, I worked with the ACLU to bring attention to the issue. I think federal protection is needed. I mean, INDA is extremely important. I actually thought I had federal protection. I think that's the case with a lot of, not just LGBT people, but just with people in general. That I remember thinking when she's like, I don't want you in my office anymore. Like, I don't agree with your lifestyle. Just thinking, fine, bring it. Like, that's totally fine. I will sue you. And then finding out that there was nothing I can do, it surprised me. I think a lot of times people look at policies, internal policies, and they feel that that's enough. But it took that experience for me to realize that policies don't mean anything unless someone's willing to enforce them. Like, you can write as much as you want on paper, but if no one's willing to do anything about it and you can't back it up, it doesn't matter.
Since the United States Congress introduced the Employment Non-Discrimination Act for the first time in 1977, and it's been introduced in every session since then, and it has failed every single time. So I think a major problem is that if you ask, in polling, you ask the general public if they think a person can be fired for being gay or lesbian, they'll say absolutely not, that's against the law. 80% of people think this is already against the law, but in 29 states for sexual orientation and 36 states for gender identity, you can still legally fire somebody simply for getting married. In Oklahoma, we had marriage equality become the law 3 weeks ago, and one of the biggest concerns people had was that they could go say I do one day and get fired the next day for that.
My first question is, what should the manager's role be in preventing harassment and discrimination in the workplace?
What we first need to do is you need to look at your policy. Adopt a clear harassment policy. Define sexual harassment. No tolerance. Discipline. It may be a terminable offense. How to report. Who to report to. The investigation process. Address no retaliation, and that's so important to address no retaliation. Train your employees, train your supervisors.
What do you think the recent Supreme Court ruling's impact will be on the workplace, and what may it mean to change in employee benefits such as health insurance for employees?
And I'm going to talk mainly in regards to the city of Edmond, because we have met with our city attorney after the Supreme Court ruling. We've met with the city attorney. We looked at our policies. We looked at our SPDs, our plan design on health insurance, on pension. It not only affects health insurance, pension, it also affects FMLA, It affects other policies that we have in place. And when we looked at our policies, we do not define spouse. So it's very clear that same-sex marriage can also be encompassed of when we say spouse, then we were going to treat them as like opposite-sex marriage.
Title VII does not currently protect affinity orientation as a protected class. How do you think that adding it to Title VII would affect the workplace?
I think that we are going to have to recognize same-sex marriage, and all anyone wants is equal treatment, and they should have as equal treatment as us. I think the risk if we don't add, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, if we don't add, we may have some disparate treatment. May lead to Title VII and state law discrimination claims. I think that there's going to be claims on the rise because we're recognizing it. We're recognizing it in our health plans, in the FMLA. We're recognizing it in our pension plan. So we're recognizing it, so why not recognize it in Title VII?
And why in the world would we not allow those equal rights for individuals who truly were committed to one another in life to be able to show that by way of a marriage? My daughter came out of the closet a couple of years ago. And you know what? I thought I was just going to agonize about that. Nothing's different. She's still a fabulous human being, and she's met a person that she loves very much. And someday, by God, I want to throw a wedding for that kid. And I hope that's exactly what I can do. I hope she will not feel like a second-class citizen involved in something called a domestic partnership, which frankly sounds like a Merry Maids franchise to me.
Gay rights groups are hailing it as a big victory. President Obama ordered any hospital that gets federal funding to give same-sex couples visitation and consultation rights.
President Obama getting ready to grant some benefits to same-sex partners of federal employees.
President Obama will sign a measure making it a federal crime to assault someone because of sexual orientation or gender identity.
No one in America should ever be afraid to walk down the street holding the hands of the person they love.
This is a triumph for not just members of the gay community, but for us as a civilization.
We are not a nation that says, don't ask, don't tell. We are a nation that says, out of many...
We have come so far, but we have so much yet to do.